this week's highlight, we'll look at China's logistics industry and talk with an expert on its development trends. But first, we are going to take you into the heart of the city's property warehousing market. In the first 10 months of this year, more than 17 million containers passed through the Shanghai Yangshan Deepwater Port, which means the annual volume of freights will exceed 20 million for the first time. As Shanghai is quickly becoming the largest logistics center in China, Cai Jie looks at supply and demand in Shanghai's warehouse property market.
Meng has been working in the logistics industry for around 10 years. Less than 2 years ago, he rented a 2,000 square meter warehouses in Baoshan district, 8 kilometers outside the Outer Ring Road. Finding a good logistic property in a good location at the right price is now becoming a big concern for small and medium-sized companies.
Everyone wants space near Waigaoqiao or Lingang for Yangshan Port. However, the rental is really too high for us. So we now have to switch to this inferior location with a lower rent.
The rental for Meng's warehouse is only 0.3 yuan per square meter per day, which is just 1/4 or 1/5 of the rental in Lingang or Waigaoqiao. However, the distance to Waigaoqiao is around 35 kilometers, which takes at least an hour by road. Most of the convenient warehouses in good locations are now owned by the big companies.
We have been assigned by probably more than 5 companies in the past 2 years for the study of entry China strategy. Those companies are all starting from logistic development. Yeah, some of them are institutional money, some of them are developers like Prologis.
The continuing success of the Chinese economy is dependent upon having good logistics, more logistics buildings.
Warehousing in Shanghai now takes up 5 times more space than 5 years ago. However, rental fees have increased by at least 50% in the past 5 years. One of the reasons is that the price of land has risen sharply in recent years, and it is under tight control of the local government.
Currently, the central government is asking every local government to issue the new detailed regulations of the auctioning of industrial land in the future. And logistic land definitely is part of industrial land. So that gives the restraints in the future acquisition of industrial land to do logistics facilities development.
The rents have certainly moved up over the last 3 or 4 years, but equally the quality of the buildings has increased. So the buildings are getting higher. So when a tenant rents some space, they rent on a square metre of building floor. So if they can store higher and higher, then they're making better efficiency from the same square metre.
Hathley says that the upward trend in rents will continue in the future, as demand for warehouses will far outstrip supply. He believes that prices will increase between 25 and 30%. This year, more than 20 million containers will be handled in the Yangshan Deepwater Port, making it the world's 3rd largest.
Every industrial sector needs logistic services, need logistic facilities for their distribution, for their storage needs. We foresee a 20% annual growth of market demand of logistic facility every year in Shanghai area. In the whole China, it will also be like 15% annual growth of market needs. So that gives a good potential for logistic facility development.
Shanghai is also the 8th biggest air cargo port in the world. Experts say that with the increasing demand but limited supply, rental cost for warehouses close to seaports and airports is definitely set to rise. But rental for those near highways will remain stable, as there are plenty of good logistic properties available in nearby provinces at lower prices. Cai Jie for Bizwatch.
And to further discuss the latest trends in industrial properties both in China and abroad, this week we talked to Hamid Mohdam, Chairman and CEO of US-based AMB Property Corporation, a global developer of industrial real estate. AMB has been active in logistics properties, especially in coastal regions across China over the years.
So share with us some of the latest trends in the global industrial property sector.
I think there are three important trends happening in global real estate and real estate generally. Number one is globalization. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, most property companies were very local. They raised their capital locally, they operated and developed in local markets, and their customers were by and large local. I think that's all changing, and you are now seeing players from all over the world active in all the major markets in the world in different property types. And the customers that occupy these buildings are in their own right global companies. And what you don't see is that the capital that finances all this activity is also coming from global sources. The other thing that's happening specifically in the logistics sector is that there's greater and greater emphasis on outsourcing. It used to be 10 to 20 years ago where manufacturers were responsible for their own supply chains. And a company manufactured something, did the distribution ultimately to the end customer. Today, those functions are being separated, and there are companies that are specialists in the logistics space that are providing those services at much more attractive costs to these global shippers or global manufacturers. And those functions are getting separated. And finally, what is happening is that the ownership of real estate supporting these activities is getting separated from the logistic activities. So a lot of companies that used to own their own warehouses not only are outsourcing the function of operating these warehouses, but are also selling these assets off their balance sheet. So the ownership and the development of the real estate is getting separated from the service side, and which in its own right is getting separated from the manufacturing side.
Some of the latest figures show that mature logistics are getting expensive really fast here in Shanghai in particular, at a quarterly ratio of about 4.5%. So what are the incentives behind this market boom?
Historically, as more and more land is being allocated to residential uses and other kinds of uses, manufacturing and the logistic operations supporting these manufacturing uses are getting pushed out, and that land is getting converted to higher and better uses such as residential. Therefore, the remaining land that's in logistic use just continues to get more and more expensive. At some point, some of these logistic activities have to actually go out of town and into areas where land is more plentiful and less expensive.
Maybe lots of companies will actually relocate their warehouses to the port.
I think basically people will locate in two different directions. One is that they will locate closer to the port where there's land that's specifically allocated for industrial use. The other thing that you'll see is that more of the distribution activity will move inland. So basically there are going to be points of consolidation inland and then points of transshipment near the ports where the containers are assembled and put on ships that sail away.
What are the common practices adopted by many of the international companies in order to save cost, to be more efficient in the logistics sector nowadays?
Every piece of inventory that sits in a warehouse is costing money. So the name of the game in global logistics is to move the supply chain quickly and move goods through the supply chain efficiently. And people are trying to do more business with less and less inventory because inventory that's sitting around in a warehouse is just costing you money. So there's a lot of technology that is developed in the supply chain to facilitate the rapid movement of goods. In an ideal scenario, if you look at a retailer, for example, in Western Europe or in the United States, and that retailer sells this suit to me, that should automatically trigger a manufacturing response all the way up the supply chain to the manufacturer of this suit that says make another one of these suits. And that process is becoming so efficient. I'm exaggerating to make a point, but the knowledge that's now deployed in the supply chain is so vital to moving the inventory faster that that's the most important way that actually manufacturers are trying to get efficiency out of their supply chain.